little bit of the original medicine you have, right? The way, a little to hear a little bit about your journey, your path. And along the way, perhaps we'll pause and do a little bit of practice ourselves and open it up to Q&A. But before we do any of that much further, I really want to open it up and invite you, Camille, to tell us a little bit more about you. About, we've heard a bit of your bio, but I'm aware that you have this kind of international background. Come to us now from Hawaii, but you lived in Canada, and your parents are also international. So I'm curious if you could just tell us a little bit about your
Sure.
story. Yeah.
Sure. Well, it's funny because, rarely do we sort of stop and think about our own journeys. So, thank you for allowing me to sort of stop and think about that. I was born in Kingston, Jamaica. And like many migrants, whether that's within the US or internationally, being an immigrant, one parent went ahead, my dad, and then sent for my mom, and I stayed with my grandma and grandpa for a number of years, Diddy and Dada, we'd call them. And then they, came back and got me a couple of years later when they were sorted in Toronto. And so I grew up really in the Toronto region and did my, was educated there for my first couple of degrees. And then I did my grad work, my LLM at Columbia. So that's what actually brought us to the States. And so, for students listening, it was always our intention to go back to Toronto. And, life can be serpentine. Yeah. So we had these opportunities, my partner and I, in the States, and we had never been to, half the places that we'd ended up living. So, we went out on a limb and moved to St. Louis because we had a great opportunity for our very young family at the time in the early 2000s, late 1990s, early 2000s, to sort of start, as a family there. We had two little kids. We had a 3-month-old when we moved to New York for grad school, and then I had an infant when we started in St. Louis, and then we had another baby in St. Louis. So we had 3 little kids when I was on the tenure track in St. Louis, and from there, we moved to New York, and we were back and forth to Hawaii a couple of times for some opportunities. And then I, was teaching at Hofstra. And I then ended up deaning in Boston, and then my husband's with the United Nations, so we lived in the Netherlands for a little while. He's, we still are sort of, used to be transatlantic, now it's transatlantic and Pacific. And then ended up going to DC for a while, and now I'm here and hope to be here for a while anyway. Yeah. So one of the lessons in that is you never know, because if someone had asked me in 1998, where would you be in 20 years? I would have said in Toronto, of course. That's where I practiced. I clerked in Ottawa, of course. My parents are here. Why wouldn't I be in Canada? But you never know. So, having been in a number of cities, for a while, those maps, you put a little push pin in lots of different places, and it's strange. And one year we were in Alaska and Hawaii in the same year. And we thought, wow, we've been to 2 of the hardest places anyway to get to traditionally in traveling. So I think we've been fortunate to be a little bit adventurous and, and realize that, the family will be fine if we're together and if we figure out how to be together, even if we're distanced.
Thank you. And thank you so much for sharing just that window. And it's good to hear about the little ones who now, you were just saying before we started the conversation, they're not little anymore, right? As happens.
They're all in university and college. One's going off to grad school. So, but again, being open to the, one was last year when they were all in undergrad, one was in LA, one was in Vancouver, and one was in Shanghai, and then the pandemic. So then, the good thing was we all were able to come back here to Hawaii together, but, one's in Shanghai again, one's in Vancouver, and one's going off to Seattle soon. So, just your life, you never know how it changes. And, one of the things is when you sort of open up the possibilities for your kids, as my family did for me, or my partner and I try to support us in that. You never know that your kids will also think, well, I'm a citizen of the world, I'll go live in wherever, I'll go live in Shanghai, why wouldn't I can do that. And it's like, okay, you're right, but I'm gonna miss you. Right, so you never know.
Wow, there's so much there that I'm curious about in your story, and I think to the extent we have students on the on the line here listening, and alums maybe that are starting out in their careers. I'm curious if you could just talk a little bit about, how you decided, frankly, to go into law from that background, and I'm wondering if your experience, your parents' experience as immigrants or migrants, if that
Mhm.
influenced at all
Yeah.
your career choices or how you approach thinking about, your life in law.
hmm it's interesting. We don't have any lawyers in the family. I didn't grow up knowing anybody, and other than, it's funny because I was thinking about my first boyfriend back in. I grew up in this little town outside of actually Toronto. It's called Whitby, and my first boyfriend's dad was a lawyer, and it was not necessarily something that impressed on me a desire to be a lawyer, because he was white and I wasn't allowed to go in the house. So, but I remember him thinking like there was some adjacency to that hierarchy that is often embedded in the law, that a part of me and somewhere deep in the back of my mind was like, if and when I become a lawyer, I'm not going to be like that. Do you know what I mean? I'm going to be nice to
Yeah.
everybody. So
Yeah.
but that was the only lawyer. He was the only lawyer I knew.
Wow.
And I only started thinking about that like recently, because when you get to a certain age, you start thinking about these different experiences, especially as your kids now have partners, boyfriends, girlfriends. You start thinking about the ways in which family also interconnects with your relationships. I was like, wow, that was my first relationship and that first encounter. And Rhonda, I'm finishing your book too, and I recognize some of this resonates, right?
Yes,
And
yes, yes.
that's what really brought it to the fore, because I think I had like sort of suppressed it. But I was drawn to the law because of social justice concerns. And I was looking for a place that I thought, or a conceptual space where I thought I could make a difference. I still think of myself and the work I do now as largely being a teacher, but within the law. But I see the law, and I'm super bullish on the law. I'm super engaged, especially for women and people of color, and just non-traditional folks, whatever that means in your space and time and whatever. I don't want to define that. But if you're bringing something that is new and innovative into any space, this is a catalytic and empowering space. So I'm super, supportive of anybody thinking about coming into the law. And for me, that was really what the law held, was a possibility to, frankly, be heard maybe. And I sort of felt no one was listening to me anyway. Like no one would listen to me without that bona fide. Like if you have something that's in you and there's something that you think you're called to share or to do, it allows you to have a vantage point where, right or wrong, people do listen to us.
Yeah.
And I could see that because I grew up seeing the ways in which, frankly, my brilliant community members and family members were not listened to.
Yeah.
And then, like to my earlier story, like a lawyer would walk into the space and everybody would be like,
Yeah.
brilliant. But like my mom with a 7th grade education might have said the exact same thing and no one cared. So those things sort of lodge in your soul somewhere. And I was thinking, haha, people listen to lawyers.
Yeah. Oh my
So,
goodness, what you're saying resonates so well, and I imagine they resonate in different ways with folks who are listening. Just naming that, the way in which we are differently situated and our voices have more or less impact in our communities, in our world, as a result of the systems and the structures that we find ourselves in. And so just having you name that, you knew your mother had things to offer in the world, and
yeah.
a voice and a point of view, but you also kind of had a sense that getting a degree like this would help you, her daughter, amplify your voice. I'd love to hear if you could speak a little bit more about, again, like how you developed this passion for social justice, the kinds of things you saw, because
Yeah.
I have a similar kind of story, right? We all have
Yeah.
these stories. Like, how did we become passionate for social justice and
Right.
also racial justice? I know you do, you're intersecting, your work intersects with critical race theory. And so I'm
Right.
curious about all of that.
And one of the things that I think is similar between your story and my story is you were in the South, right?
I was in North
You,
Carolina, where I was
and,
born, and then I went to
right.
school in Virginia.
And a lot of people think Canada is the promised land because of the snippet of history that we promote. I grew up in Canada and experienced a lot of the exact same things that you experience. And I think it's hard because I think as Canadians, we brand ourselves as the terminus of like the Underground Railroad. And that's for a moment in history. I mean, we had slavery too. We had all of the same systems of oppression based on the same common law and the same British colonial traditions born out of an imperialist empire. So how would we differ massively in the ways we encounter the other? We don't.
Yeah.
And so, part of it was, my experiences growing up, the things that I think many kids of color experience, I was a really good student in elementary school, but like, my seventh grade teacher, it sounds trite to say this now, and I almost say it with this weird distancing, but he was like, you should really go to vocational school and become a hairdresser. And I was like, wait a second, I have straight A's. I think I would always get a B in spelling, but it was still, so thank goodness for spell check. But, but it would round out to an A, like I was a solid A student. I remember going home and had the form for the vocational school. And I brought it to my dad, who, was a teacher, and he like blew his lid and went off about profiling and, all the things that as a teacher he was seeing perpetuated throughout the systems. So there were things like that happen all the time. I mean, there's the reality that those sorts of they could be massive insofar as people would call them microaggressions. But had I deferred and had I listened and had I not had someone to disrupt my thinking that this teacher, who I really liked, by the way, and I thought really liked me, was looking out for me, I think my life course would have been different. Not that it would have been worse. So things like that happen. I mean, there were instances where, people would follow me home and spit all over our house and worse and things like that. And my mom couldn't understand the racial dynamic because she was like the same sort of thing. But we live in this suburb in Canada. We have very little in the house, but we moved to this neighborhood so you could go to that good school. Like we've sacrificed all this. So she couldn't understand because the houses look nice, but there's still the same racial void in so many people. And my father was always really great at narrating what we saw on TV. We had news out of Buffalo, Lackawanna, Cheektowaga, and Rochester occasionally. So, there was always this parade of quote unquote horribles in which this litany of black and brown faces being paraded across the news screens in terms of, the newscast. And, so he would talk about over policing, and he would talk about, racism, and he would talk about things that we were hearing, and he would editorialize constantly, as parents often do.
Yes.
And I think
it helped you.
It helped me frame. And the thing is, when you're young, you don't have your own language, right? You're trying to figure things out, and the danger is that you're in figuring things out. We can internalize that.
Yes.
And think like they're spitting all over my house because they're calling me these names because I'm ugly and stupid, right? Or they're doing all this because I really am not deserving of hanging out with them. They're doing I'm not allowed in their house because I'm really unworthy. Like there's a way in which, without people championing you, you can actually start believing the stories about yourself based on the ways other people treat you.
Oh my goodness, I'm so glad you're naming that, because the moment that we're in, and I'm just glad that you're willing to talk a little bit about, again, the backstory, which I think really we're all curious about, because the truth is, as of now, you and I, for example, we have made it right in this world that wasn't created for folks like us.
Right.
And it can be perhaps hard for us to find places where we can just actually talk a little bit about how we managed to get here. But I think talking about that path is helpful in many ways, in part because we can help folks who are on the path, perhaps students who are on the path, alums, younger alums, right, who are just starting out in their careers and have a life ahead of them of maybe working the world. Imagine a path for them, notwithstanding these sorts of challenges. And also, of course, we know we're in a time where we used to think we were constantly getting better, and we could imagine a day when we wouldn't have to worry about all of this.
Right. We were supposed to be post-racial after 2008, weren't we?
We were supposed to be. Here we are. But and therefore, all of the different dimensions of it and all the subtleties and all the complexities are once again impacting us. And yet we, I think we're often wanting to have, I'll say for myself, wanting to have a little bit more opportunity to reflect with others about, how we're bearing up, and what we would offer as folks are looking at this, and some folks waking up for the first time to, oh my goodness, this is still real. I've got to also help my children, my young kids in my family get through this. What are some of the ways I can help them move through? And the internalization part is one of the most challenging parts. Actually, when you were telling the story of um, the guidance counselor, the teacher saying,
Mhm.
oh, maybe you should be a hairdresser. um, I somehow the story that came up for me, that was one of the stories that was somewhat similar, I think dovetails with this internalized racism issue,
Mhm.
because there was someone in my own family. Now, I too had been a
Mhm.
strong student, had gotten all of these opportunities to really apply to good colleges and universities, and including actually a scholarship to, the University of Virginia, where I ended up going. Um, and this particular person in my family said, you know, wanted to sit me down and make sure I had a stern talk about how maybe I would fail,
Yeah.
and I should probably not shoot so far, and
Mhm.
maybe start, really strongly suggested I turn down scholarships and just start at a community college and
Mhm.
prepare to not do well. I'm like, whoa,
Yeah.
whoa, 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 whoa.
Right. Right.
So these the challenges we face around navigating a world in which we're getting these messages constantly are greater than is often advertised, right?
Yeah.
It is not easy, even if you're strong, have capacities, you're doing well in your different institutions, in your schools, etc. The messages, the
I agree. And
microaggressions.
sometimes the messages are from ourselves and from others who are dear to us and who really love us, right? They
Yes.
really think they're giving us the best message. I mean, as a Jamaican, I hearken to Bob Marley's Redemption song, right? So the emancipate yourself from mental slavery, none but ourselves can free our minds. And
Mm,
that's sometimes the hardest thing.
yes.
I've been saying to my kids, like, if you could dream anything, what would you dream? Like, if you could do anything, what would you want to do? And then we start doing this, like, but I can't do that because I'm this, and I can't do that because I this, and I can't do that because I don't. And we literally start talking ourselves out of even allowing ourselves the possibility of dreaming. Like, that's how deep this is. I do it too. I'm not saying I'm liberated, right, from my own mind.
We all do it.
Yeah.
So I'm curious then. I know that in the work that you've done, you have managed to make the most of these opportunities, been a star, right? And managed to move into, from law practice, right? Being obviously getting into law school and becoming a lawyer, then going into legal academia, and now for years you've been in leadership. How is it that some of these experiences inform your approach to, well, maybe informed your the decision to go from practicing law to coming into academia, and then moving from the ranks of faculty to deaning, and I know, who knows where the future is for you from here, because you do have this beautiful passion and commitment to higher education. How is it that those experiences inform your sense of, what's called for right now when you think of the challenges of our time, the leadership challenges of our time that are all over the world, and what the kind of experiences that you've had can teach us, and might, be again that medicine for these times.
Yeah. One of the interesting things is at some point you start to believe in yourself. And there were occasions where I was nominated, for example, for decanal positions. And just like my dreaming analysis, I was like, are you kidding? They're never going to give a job to a dark skinned, dreadlock Black woman who's a double immigrant. And I literally had all the reasons laid out, like the top 10 reasons why Camille will not become a dean. And at a certain point, I put my hat in the ring because, a friend called me up. He's like, are you ever going to actually accept one of these nominations? I was like, well, maybe. And then you go through the process and you start seeing that, wait a second, and this is really important for students to understand. Sometimes we think everybody else doing this job is so much smarter than us or more capable or gifted or just, and you start in different spaces to understand that that's not the case. Like everybody else in the room that you're not in is not way smarter than you and is not somehow this genius that you are not. Rather, one, they have confidence. Two, they've had access. Three, they've had sponsors and mentors in many cases and boosters, right? And so all of that top 10 list that I would have for myself, they don't have that for themselves in many cases. Even if maybe, you know, some humility was in order. So you start to sort of think, wait a second, I could do this, right? If given the opportunity, and which is from sometimes just as hard, if not the harder part. So, you know, I had people supporting me, and then you get into the roles. And frankly, one of my dear friends from Suffolk had said, "You're just the right type of crazy to do this job," which is sort of, you know, so
be careful what you ask for.
Right. Because part of it is too, you know, if you're not willing to sacrifice, and if you're really not passionate about the students and what you could do to better support them, it's not for you, right? But I also don't know that working in this way at this pace constantly is a good lifetime strategy, because I do think you can get burned out, and I do think you can become exhausted, and I do think it can be debilitating if like constantly working like a certain, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like you can't always be sprinting, and that comes to how you maintain yourself, right?
Absolutely, which we'll turn to in a moment. But you're really opening the door, the aperture a bit for a question or two, just about, you know, some of the ways. You're right. It's exhausting, and the models for what it means to be a successful leader are
Right.
kind of over the top, and they don't let up, even though we're in pandemics.
Right.
Right. The models for success at all don't really let up. In fact, people maybe have some reason to be feeling more needful to demonstrate that they're on top of it, even though we're in these pandemics. So our, you know, dominant culture and models of what it means to be successful are, let's say, they may be in need of some humanizing in a certain
Right.
way, right?
Right.
Right.
I
So
gave a lecture at the University of Florida a couple of weeks ago, and you know that "keep calm, carry on"
yeah,
frame? I
yeah.
had this frame that I found on the web called "keep calm and act like everything is normal." It's so not, right? Act like it. Yeah.
Right. So I'm curious to hear, well, I am ultimately curious to hear a little bit more about how you do keep calm and not just act like everything is normal, but, you know, humanize and normalize for yourself. Because again, you know, as you succeed, people start to have this outsized image of, you know, the exceptional Camille, right? Who can do it all and will always be doing many different things at once. And so I am curious about that. But before we get to that part of the story, I'm just curious, you know, we are in these interlocking pandemics, and, you know, a lot of people are suffering in a lot of different ways. And our students are suffering. You know, research is showing that
Yeah.
folks in college, folks in universities are a hidden group of folks who are suffering disproportionately. A lot of dreams have been crushed during this period. A lot of expectations at a critical point in life are being delayed, deferred, you know, and actually the data is showing that depression is higher than it had been, and so on and so forth. So what are some of the ways that, as you know, again, embark on and think about the next phase of the ways that we might help maximize these opportunities we have to help develop students, to help support students? What are
Mhm.
some of the lessons you're picking up from this period? Again,
Sure.
what's happening to distress folks, but also, as you say, as we're both saying, the dominant models for being a success make it hard for us to admit we're vulnerable and admit that we need help sometimes.
Absolutely. And everybody does need help sometimes. I mean, no one can optimize their time on this earth without the comforting and nurturing of others, right? We get by with a little help from our friends, frankly, more than a little. And I thanks for mentioning, Rhonda, in this moment, the multiple layers of sort of fracture, right? I mean, pandemic,
Yeah.
international racial reckoning, like a really polarized election cycle, right? The three I's, what the insurrection, right? The inauguration and the impeachment. I mean,
And
we've
then, of
been
course,
through a lot.
stress and weather
Right.
and
Right.
infrastructure breakdowns that we're
Exactly.
seeing in the South
Exactly.
or in Texas and elsewhere.
Exactly. It seems nonstop, right? So, I mean, if you feel like you're about to come undone, that probably makes you more sane than anybody else. I worry for people who are like, yeah, I'm good, everything's good, there's nothing wrong here, I'm coping perfectly, because I just sort of stop and think, how could we be our best selves right now? Like with everything that's going on. I mean, it takes work to come into this moment aware of everything going on and not feel it.
Yes.
Right. And so to feel it and still persist takes coping strategies, and to still be human and caring and feeling and not sort of like, shut down and not want to get out of bed takes some real, I think, intentional commitment to yourself and your own well-being. And I'll talk a bit about what I do, but I want to say, like, one of the things, it doesn't matter what position you're in. I mean, position is just your title and what, comes behind your name. What matters more is who you are in whatever role you're in. But I can say, as a Black woman, part of being in this role, Ron, is I also know this. I mean, for all of the challenges are based on my identity that come with this role, there would be the same challenges based on identity in pretty much any role I'd be in. And what has happened over the last 20 something years is I have developed my coping skills for that a little bit more, and I see a little bit more clearly. I'm like, aha, you were this dude at that place who is going to come, what I mean? And I see you more quickly. And so I know how to manage it a little bit, I hope, better, and it doesn't puncture my soul as much. Because that's, I think, the wounding is it starts to like hurt you physically and psychically and like spiritually. So, I mean, we've talked about this. I mean, I meditate every day at least once. Some days like a 3 time a day meditation. And really that's, it doesn't, people are like, how long do you meditate? It's really like, can we just stop for a couple of minutes and breathe, right?
Just moments of pausing sometimes.
Yes. Pausing. And I've been fortunate where I am. I can go sometimes just sit outside for a little bit, right? And see the sunshine. Or we were talking about the birds, hear the birds, right?
Exactly. Beautiful.
And what a blessing. What a blessing. I have a Peloton. That was my treat for myself a few years ago when I turned 50. I invested in one, and I love that thing. And it's weird because it also, you feel you're a part of this community, and there's all these little groups within it. So I'm like Black Girls Ride or this or that,
Yeah.
And so that
maybe
helped.
Actual physical movement.
Right.
That, is its own medicine.
Exactly.
And especially in a pandemic.
And it makes me laugh. Like sometimes with these instructors, you're just laughing and they're telling these stories. I've started playing a tennis again, but also the thing that I think makes me really happy, I know, like, how could you be upset when you're dancing? So, I was certified as a Zumba instructor years ago, but the main thing is just to dance, right? Like, so I signed up recently for the Alvin Ailey online classes again. And here it's a little bit difficult with the time zone, but I'll be in that little hip hop class, not doing anything in step, but still just like shaking my thing. And how could you not be happy when you're like trying to keep up with something? It's just laugh out loud funny half the time, right? So
movement. It sounds like you've had a long engagement with different types of movement, and knowing that part of yourself, right? The part of yourself that loves tennis and Zoom, right? Dancing and that, I think, again, and the Peloton, reminding ourselves that how important movement is, and also giving ourselves time, right? Because again, people will say, I don't have time for that.
Right. Guilt-free time.
Tell us a little bit about how you give yourself, or how you've come to see the value of that. And again, if there's some way, also, I'm curious if you are imagining or already do, because I know you're well known for helping create, supportive workplaces and schools where you've been teaching. Part of, what you have offered is ways for faculty and students to feel a sense of community, to feel support. Are there ways that you bring some of these insights into what it is you offer or support your students in? And this may sound like a crazy question. I know you're a law dean. Maybe there's no role for movement.
Well, no, so when I was at American, we did have, I think we called it Mindfulness Mondays, and we had, a person who came in and had hour-long meditation sessions in the room that we also had set up in case people wanted to go and have a nap. Or some, we had the prayer mats and we had beanbag chairs, and we created that space intentionally. And some other days there was Pilates and there's yoga. Obviously with the pandemic, these things are hard. We've been trying to replicate some of that here, and we're creating a mindfulness series that's going to lift in the spring here as well intentionally. At the University of Hawaii, we have the benefit of having a medical school and a school of social work and a school of public health. So we're partnering with some of this because the students need clinical hours as well in terms of the counseling support and the mindfulness practices. And so we're going to be doing some more things that will lift in the spring. When I was in DC, our parties, to the extent I could sponsor a holiday party, we would have a local DJ in, and, he was very reasonably priced. And sometimes that was my gift. Sometimes it was, but it's really hard to be angry at someone else or your colleague, or if your little kids are running around dancing and you're dancing with the little kids and you're dancing with it's just, and the music's going like, it was a nice, just calm down. Everybody's in this space to have a good time.
Again,
humanized. Everybody is humanized, right? And, things that we tried to do, the intention often was the students would have a gathering over here, the staff would have a gathering, the faculty would have a gathering for like Halloween and things like that. We just say, everybody's gathering together, so instead of you guys just having your costume party, I'm going to dress up as well. I'm going to come to the party. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So to the extent we can all be in the space together as community, like sometimes it's not appropriate, but most of the times we can figure it out. So the faculty is humanized, the students see the faculty in a different way and can engage casually, so trying to create those communities, opportunities, because it's also humbling, right? It's also humbling. And you also create the opportunities for us to learn more about and from our students as well, right?
Absolutely. So I'm so along those lines, right? We need each other. We need to keep learning from each other. When I listen to my students, I'm hearing, we're at USF, so we got students. Some are undocumented, some are, bearing up with law school, but also dealing with, elder care right now that they didn't have before, partly because of the pandemic, and the feeling some of the mental health related challenges, but also just concerned about questions of justice at this time.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about particular ways you're thinking about legal education meeting the injustice moments and crises of our time. In other words, I see this link between well-being and doing justice, right? Not just minimizing our capacity for burnout, but seeing this as kind of, I call it sometimes personal justice work, but seeing the link between caring for ourselves and then caring for the world. And so I am curious about like ways in which this particular moment is concentrating your mind, getting you thinking about, again, like meeting what are some of the particular injustices that you're thinking about or wanting to support students in engaging with, or thinking about, and how you're being able to sustain in law helps prepare you for, again, some particular justice work right now.
Right, for the marathon that is justice work, right? Because it's not like this and we're done. It's not, now we're good. It seems, unfortunately, that we never are like, okay, it's all solved. Everybody treats everybody well now. Everybody respects and appreciates and embraces everybody positively and affirmatively. This is the work. And I think another part of that dynamic is our well-being is impacted by the lack of justice.
Exactly.
Personally and community-wide, and in terms of what we're seeing. I mean, I'll be honest, I couldn't finish watching the George Floyd video. I couldn't finish. And some of the work I do, I mean, I'll be honest, I have a paper that was like, it's like over a year due, because then there's another killing that I feel like I have to sort through and research, and then something else happens and I have to sort through and research, and I need to take a moment.
Yes.
But also you're grieving vicariously, and you're traumatized vicariously. So then your own well-being, not that is anywhere close to the family that just lost that loved one,
but it's
impacted.
Absolutely.
So I don't want to not acknowledge how hard it is to do the work that many of you are doing at the pace that you're doing it, and in the places that you're doing it. That being said, I think that acknowledgement with humility is crucial. And recognizing that many people are suffering for lots of reasons, and you add in the economic
Yep.
intersection to this, the elder care, the child care, the isolation of working from home, the despair, right? People, many of us have lost people during the pandemic,
Exactly.
right, to COVID. And so you factor that in, and you have to have some ability to not, I don't know if it's the word is lower your expectations, but recognize that we have to help each other more to meet those expectations.
So taking
For
care
the
of ourselves
enterprises to work
and
and
taking
each
care of each
other.
other, yeah, is part
And,
of the justice
right,
work, right?
I think necessarily, because no one can do it alone, but also it's such a heavy burden. Like, and I don't just mean first of all, the spiritual work, the psychic work, the psychological and emotional work does take a toll on your
It does.
physicality, and your lack of physical sort of like preparedness also then circles into the psychology and the emotional, right? Like, why am I so tired type thing, right?
Right.
And then you have to be forgiving to yourself, right? Because you can't sustain all the time without sort of refilling your cup. So I think trying to recognize where we are, and it's always hard in resource constrained institutions to build in like infrastructure. Like, I would love to hire a psychologist, as I did in DC, just for our students here.
Wow. So you were able to do it in DC at the
I
law.
was able to do it for, I mean, we were a massive school, right?
Mhm.
One of the fourth or fifth largest school in the country. And, students often have, concerns about if they have to leave campus to go to another campus, or whether they can get the care they need through the services on campus, on a main campus in quotes, or
Right.
elsewhere, right? Just the timing sometimes doesn't work as well for law students.
Exactly.
And there's a sense sometimes that the stresses of law school and the intensity of law school aren't fully understood, perhaps. That's how some of it was coming to me. So I
Yeah.
was able to, bring in someone who was our designated person at the school.
Right.
And she was busy. She was busy before the pandemic, and she was busier after the pandemic. But it
Wow.
took, this is how things work. Sometimes people want things like this. It took me a year to do that. Like, just going through like all the rationales.
Yeah.
Why do we need our own? Like, how could I do this? Where,
Yeah.
and also getting people, because you also can't always pay people what they really
Right.
should be paid for this crucial life-saving work in many cases. So sometimes people get frustrated because of the resource constraints, which are even more real now,
Yep. They are.
right? And
Exactly.
then
We're having to do more with less.
we have to ask our wonderful faculty like you to
Mhm.
do more for the same,
Right. Exactly.
right?
Or less.
Right? Or less, or less. Good point. Good
Seriously.
point. Yeah, no, it's true. No, and many people
People
have
are being
taken
laid
pay
off.
cuts. And, right,
Exactly. We're getting up
absolutely.
with pay cuts in this time. So,
Right,
or about to.
right.
So it's hard. And yet we're the people that
Your
folks turn,
front line.
right?
Yep. Yep.
We're
Your
the
front
people,
line.
yeah, who folks turn to. And I don't just mean faculty of color in this sense, or women of color in these spaces, although that's part of it, actually,
Yeah.
often disproportionately. But I mean lawyers and people who say, yes, we can, or I will take up this responsibility in leadership in my community. I'll serve in this role.
Right.
And so we are, therefore, often we see a lot of the suffering, right? We see, people obviously trying to work with systems to change them. We just came from this epic battle around voting and political participation, and of course, we now know we got to stay involved if we want things to happen in our broader politics. We've got to devote time to staying involved in the politics. So, yeah, I mean, I guess for me, I certainly want our students to feel inspired, notwithstanding all of these challenges, because we're here,
Yeah.
right? And many of the folks who come to law school today, I mean, the students of today are coming from a broadly diverse, broad cross section of our culture. Many first generation law students, as I was,
Mhm.
first generation college students, frankly, then go to law school, as I was, and and despite all the challenges, there's so much rich opportunity
Mhm.
for our
Yeah.
students. So I hope that for the students who are on the call and for folks who are just getting started in their careers, we are finding the networks and building the networks of support and the practices to support us to sustain, because the work is still so important and so very prevalent. Whether you're
Yeah.
interested in immigration rights, thank goodness new immigration policies at least being
Right.
announced by Biden, and hopefully they'll end up being enacted in positive ways. But there are just so many different real world challenges: this rampant greed and inequality, homelessness, and we know there are follow on consequences to the pandemics that are really going to cause even
Right.
more pain and suffering. There's so many layers to getting out of the situation that we're in terms of the virus and its impacts. So I want to shift us to a little bit of practice because, again, soberly looking at the challenges of our time, knowing that as we're here, we are privileged to have opportunities to make a difference. We do. And yet we've got to take care of ourselves along the way. So if I might just maybe invite us, would you be willing, my dear, to just sit together in a little bit of practice? I'm going to
Yeah.
ring a bell here. And
Got
um,
your bowl?
I got my bell here.
Yeah, I remember being on a panel with you and you had it and you led a beautiful session.
Yes.
Yes,
And we know we don't have to have a bell to support us, but I'm
I
going to
like it.
and use this. Yeah. And if for those who are listening, if you are willing, please allow the sound of this bell to be a support for pausing, turning your attention to your inner experience in this moment. I'll guide you lightly in this invitation to kind of rest for the next few minutes in the sensations of being in your body and checking in with yourself with this intention of really exploring self care as a support for your journey. So, just inviting in these few minutes a coming home to the sense of the body in contact with the ground beneath us. You might begin by just noticing the points of contact between the body and the floor, whether you're sitting in a chair, as many of us are, or you might be standing or lying down. The invitation is to just really come home to a sense of the body as a whole, resting in the seated position or standing or however you happen to find yourself, but resting in contact with these sources of support that exist for you right now: the ground beneath you, the chair that you can just take a deep breath in and really feel your body resting in the support of the ground, the chair, the bed, wherever you happen to find yourself in this moment. So, coming into this deeper awareness of the whole body, resting in contact with the earth. And as you breathe in and out, feeling this gentle invitation to just check in and notice the preciousness of your own life. This gentle in breath and out breath as a reminder that you're here, right now. And for these few moments of practice, seeing if you can just expand the spaciousness around the sensations of breathing so you're aware of this in breath and out breath, but giving it space and feeling the body as a whole. So gently, maybe noticing a rising and falling of the diaphragm, the lower abdomen, or maybe noticing gentle temperature shift around the nostrils as you breathe in and out. But really feeling this moment of your life, the preciousness of your life, the goodness of your heart, and resting in this sort of spacious holding of your experience in this moment. feeling the support of the ground, feeling the support of the breath itself, perhaps noticing on the next in-breath what happens, some of the impacts of a cleansing breath. So maybe taking one or two deeper than usual breaths for you and just resting in the sway of the in-breath and the out-breath. As we do so, sometimes just resting, we can start to feel tired and notice as we do so the way in which the body is telling us we might benefit from a little bit more sleep. Or in these moments of mindful checking in, we might notice a little bit of emotion coming up. So perhaps as you're sitting, allowing your attention as you breathe in and breathe out to open up to whatever sensations in the body that might indicate that you're carrying any stress or distress. So perhaps a gentle scan of the body up through the feet on the floor, lower legs, upper legs, now up through the torso and this region of the body we call the core, where so much important work happens, where we feel our gut, our notion of like our sense of our intentions, the energy for making a difference often arises out of a sense in our gut that something matters. So breathing in and breathing out and just honoring that region of the body that's so important. Now up through the chest as you breathe in and out. Another critical region, obviously, thank goodness, the heart beating, the lungs. So as you gently scan up through the shoulders, maybe notice if there's any way you're holding any stress any more than you need to. And so perhaps on the next out breath, just letting go and relaxing, releasing just a little bit more. And feeling, again, just what it's like for you to just give yourself a bit of kind holding of your experience. Lovingly embracing the preciousness of the moments of your life, right here, right now. And so if any difficult emotions, because as we sit, we might not only sense any tension in the body, but also maybe sadness, grief, anger, but we might also notice ease unfolding, whatever is arising. If it's difficulty, sometimes I place one or two hands over the heart and just allow myself a feeling of sometimes I rub my hands together with that warmth that can come, and then placing one hand over the heart or both. One hand over the heart, one underneath the belly button. Just see if just these placing of the hands on points of contact in the body add an extra dimension of support for you. And breathing in and breathing out, just allowing yourself to come home to a sense of the goodness of your life. Again, the goodness in your own heart. And so as we begin to draw this meditation to a close, this self-compassionate meditation to a close, the invitation is to feel that wish that you carry for calming yourself, surviving, thriving in this moment. And imagine sending that wish for thriving in a way that includes yourself, but extends to everyone who's here listening to the sound of my voice, whether live or in a recorded on demand where someone may be listening to this, wherever you happen to find yourselves, extending this wish for compassion. Imagine that as we practice in ways that support ourselves, we deepen our capacity to connect and thrive together in our workplaces, in our communities and families, offer the wish for wellness to those with whom we work, to our families, those suffering in our communities and beyond. So as we close, maybe checking in and seeing if there's one word or two that captures a way in which you might carry something from this practice. Maybe draw a thread of something that might support you in engaging in the work that you have to do for the rest of the day, the balance of this remaining week, and beyond.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did a word or two come up for you, my dear, as you were sitting and practicing a phrase?
I was thinking I have to be more forgiving of myself.
Mm.
Sometimes, there's all these things that I'm a chronic list maker, whether that's on a site on or the virtual sticky notes or whatever. And if I don't get through all of them, sometimes I go, oh my gosh, but sometimes you gotta like be kind to yourself and just be like, okay, there is always work, you will get to it. And right now you just need to your point earlier to our conversation, go take a walk or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take a walk, get some fresh air.
Yeah.
Notice the power that can come from just a cleansing breath, a walk outside to then focus.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much for that, because which can be so hard on ourselves. And we're in it for the marathon, as you said before, to continue to do what we can to offer our highest and best during these difficult times. It's important to
Yeah.
take time. And I'm thinking of, one of our American intellectuals from way back, Ralph Waldo Emerson, who's, just one of the many heroes in my own journey to this place, who talked about at the end of the day, finish each day and be done with it. You have done what you could. Like
Mhm.
literally, you've done
Yeah.
what you could. So if we can give each other kindness as we continue to put one foot in front of the other, and
Right.
most we can of the opportunities that we have, then that's what else can we do? That's exercising the power to be a force for good. So
Right.
thank
Well,
you, my dear Dean Nelson.
thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it's been lovely to talk with you and to hear a bit of the ways in which you are exercising your power to be a force for good. You've been an inspiration to me personally, my dear, for some part of this journey for me. I remember the first time I encountered you, I'm like, wait, what? Okay. Yes. We're going to keep doing these good things in the world. So thank you for all that you
Thank you.
are. Yeah. And be well, be safe.
Great.
And until we see each other again, enjoy Hawaii.
Looking forward to it. Thank you so much. And thanks for the invite. Thanks, Julie. All
Of
right. Take
course.
care.
Thanks for everybody who's been
As
here.
well.
Yeah. Be
I
well.
just want to remind everyone to join us for the next session, which is on Thursday, March 18th with Marisa
Rodriguez, yes, one of our alums who is doing great things here in San Francisco. And I look forward to having a conversation with her about how it is that she's engaging in racial equity work at the local policy level and trying to infuse, again, commitment to well-being as part of that practice of justice living in the world.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see
Take care,
everybody
everybody.
next time. Take care. Bye.